back to Mood India, California Arts Association's presentation of performing arts from India. I'm your host, Arvind Kansal. Continuing our series on Indian musical instruments, today we are going to talk about Sarod, an Indian string instrument. This is the second part of our two-part series on Sarod. In the studio we have Parag Chordia, and accompanying him on Tabla is Farhan Qureshi. Parag has learned Sarod from Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta of Senia Shahjahanpur lineage. Farhan is learning Tabla from Ustad Tariq Khan of Punjab Gharana. Welcome again.
Good to be here.
In the first part, we talked about basic introduction to Sarod, what are the basic playing techniques, its place in Indian classical instruments. Today, can we talk about Sarod performance? What is the structure of a Sarod performance? What are the fixed and the improvisational parts?
Sure. I'll begin by giving a brief description of a Sarod performance, and indeed any instrumental performance follows this basic pattern which originated in Drupad music, both in terms of vocal Drupad music and music that the Beankers played. And typically, in a full piece, you start with alap. Alap is an unmetered section. There's no explicit rhythmic pulse, and it's played without the accompaniment of tabla. And the basic idea, alap is very, very central in our music because it's where you see the purest vision of the rag. You see the essential melodic ideas, and the essential melodic beauty is brought out by very deliberate expansion of the basic phrases. So, for example, phrases, we bring out different aspects of the rag. The essential expression of rag is in the alap. After the alap proper, we introduce a pulse. This section is called jor. There's an overall pulse, you feel the beat, but there's no overarching rhythmic cycle.
Right.
So the difference between having a pulse and having a rhythmic cycle, we're going to see later, but it basically has to do with when you have a pulse, you have it regularly spaced, you can sort of clap along. When you have a rhythmic cycle, every so often you say that one of those down claps is a structurally important point, and then we restart. So this is how the idea of a cycle gets introduced. Because you have a basic pulse, and then you assign certain beats prominence. So for example, suppose we're playing like this. Now suppose we go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've taken a linear pattern and now made it circular by assigning this prominence to a certain position.
And assigned it into a cyclic pattern then.
Well, yeah, and it becomes a cyclic pattern precisely because you're saying beats which are separated, say, by 4 beats are now connected in this sense. After the jor, we play jhala, which is essentially just an acceleration. So jhala continues like this. Essentially, you're seeing a shift from the alap, where the emphasis is on these sort of subtle inflections, the subtle melodic grace, to the jor and jhala, where you have increasing emphasis on rhythmic play.
Right.
After the jhala, we introduce the compositions. So up to now it's been improvised, of course within the structure of rag, but extemporaneous. At this point we introduce a fixed composition. Usually we start with a slow composition. It can be set to any number of tals, although the vast majority of times it's set to 3 tal, which is a cycle of 16 beats. Other common tals are jap tal, 10 beats, rupak tal, 7 beats, ek tal, 12 beats, chumra tal, etc. Now, the key thing about the compositions that we played, the first one is called Masit Khanigat, after its creator, Masjid Khan. And the key thing about it is that you hear a certain refrain, and we keep coming back to this refrain even when we do improvisations. The essence of what we do in the gut section, the gut kari, it revolves around playing this theme and then doing variations, elaborations of that theme. And the elaborations become freer and more rhythmically intense as we progress.
So you start from a kernel and then expand outwards.
Yeah, exactly. And that kernel is precisely the fixed composition. That gives us our basic material. It sort of defines the approach we're going to be taking to the rag initially. And then more and more free sections are introduced and interpolated in that fixed structure. So to give you an example, important part you can say of this composition is the refrain, which goes like this. The reason it's so important is because the first beat of the rhythmic cycle is the point of maximum release. You build tension within the cycle, approaching the sum, and then you release it on the sum. This phrase leading up to the sum therefore gives the audience an idea that we're coming around to the sum. They were coming to the point of resolution, so pay attention, in other words.
It increases the expectation.
Exactly. You're basically playing with the listener's expectation. So when you hear that mukra, you know that they're coming around to sum. It's a signal. And the return to the, sometimes you'll return directly to the sum, but very typically in the Vilambit section, you'll be playing your improvisations and then you'll return to the refrain. And that's a very beautiful, beautiful thing that's done in the Vilambit section, is returning to the mukra rather than immediately landing your improvisations on the sum. After the Vilambit section, we play a drut composition, which is distinguished by the fact that it's now set to a much faster tempo. Continue again to do weave improvisations around that fixed composition.
I see.
Always returning to the basic structure. So what I've outlined you is a typical performance. Now, in a full-length rendition, that could range anywhere from, say, 30 minutes to an hour and a half.
Wow.
So there's a huge range, even when you're presenting full section. But then, as per the needs of the performer and the audience, you can abridge certain sections, you can omit certain sections. Sometimes you'll start immediately with the gut. Sometimes you'll only play ala proper but no jor and jala. That's a very common thing, where you'll play ala proper and then you'll go into your composition. Sometimes you'll play only the fast composition. So within that framework, you have tremendous flexibility in the overall form.
There's a lot of leeway there.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you want, and some rags are more conducive to full-length renditions. Some rags are more microscopic in the sense that they're miniatures, and you want to sort of bring out their beauty in a quick way rather than an expansive elaboration.
In terms of a performance for Sarod, what is it that makes it beautiful and aesthetically pleasing?
You know, what makes a Sarod performance beautiful is, in an abstract sense, similar to what makes any performance of rag music beautiful. First and foremost is a feeling for rag. Rag is the underlying thing behind whatever we do. I mean, rag and tal. And it's a bit hard to describe because it's so much a psychological response to basically know. I mean, it's very difficult to say what is beautiful. I mean, you know beauty when you see it.
Right.
Now, I could give an explanation, a technical explanation of what I think is happening, but fundamentally for the listener, what is beautiful is what they find to be beautiful.
Right.
And what that means typically, I mean, although certain characteristics definitely come out. One is the tone. Every great performer has a very beautiful tone. That's the timbre of the instrument, the sound of the instrument. So even though I'm playing this note and a sitar player may play that note and another sarod player play that note, depending on our instrument and our technique, that note is going to sound very different. Okay? So that's something aside from melody and rhythm is timbre. And actually it's the first thing you're sort of aware of with any performer. It's the timbre of their instrument. Ustad Ali Akbar Khan caused a revolution with the sound of his instrument. It was so beautiful. And similarly, that was part of the whole revolution that we spoke of last time, with people started to create instruments and have playing techniques where the tone was just so beautiful. Vilayat Khan, Ali Akbar Khan, Radhika Mohan Moitra, and many other people. So tone is one very important thing. Secondly, in rag music, at the basic level, is intonation. Because so many of our ornaments, so much of what we do centers around the purity of our note, it's very important to be able to play a note with accuracy.
Right.
If I'm playing this, but instead I play, it's not going to sound good, obviously. And now that's a gross example, but the basic principle holds very much true. What really distinguishes the top level performers from those below them is they consistently intone their notes very, very accurately. And it's a very difficult mechanical skill. So intonation is a second crucial factor. Third thing is the depth with which they perceive the rag, their understanding of the rag. If you're a connoisseur, you want to hear something which is creatively done within the rag. So you want to hear what are their ideas, what is creative in their music.
Right.
So again, it's a very difficult thing to break down because you can always list a bunch of factors, and when we're doing this kind of a discussion, there's a tendency to give a laundry list of criteria. Okay, these melodic characteristics have to be there. This ragdari has to be there. That is, the proper exposition of the rag has to be there. Melodic imagination has to be there. Rhythmic imagination has to be there. You can't just be static. It has to be very dynamic with the tabla player. But when it comes down to it, every performer has those things which he or she emphasizes. And what really makes a great performer is the feeling when you're listening to them that is the greatest music in the world. So when you're in fact, under that spell, in that particular aesthetic vision, it seems complete and you don't miss anything. When you're listening to Amir Khan, you don't think of Bade Ghulam Ali Khan. When you're thinking of Bade Ghulam Ali Khan, you don't think of Amir Khan. When you're listening to Fayaz Khan, same thing. Everyone has a complete, coherent vision. And that doesn't necessarily mean it includes every possible thing. In fact, many of the most beautiful styles omit many things and focus just on a few things. So that really is musical genius, to know what to bring in, what to emphasize, what's going to make a complete and beautiful style. And there's really no algorithm for it. It's just sadhana, riyaz, and that God-given talent, that God-given imagination. So those factors. And I would mention one last thing, which is in our music, what's very important is the way in which you approach the note, the love which you give to the note. And what that really means is a lot of our phrases, especially in the alap, are full of slides, full of shakes, and that grace, how you approach those subtle ornaments, make all the difference. It's sort of like pronouncing a language beautifully and mispronouncing a language. And one of the most difficult things to do for a performer who hasn't been steeped in it all their life is to pronounce it correctly, to bring out that full beauty. And again, I would bring up, in this regard, I mean, Ali Akbar Khan and Vilayat Khan were the ones, nobody can match the subtlety of their touch. Everyone has their own beauty. For example, Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, if you look at the structure, the architectonics, you can say, of his performance, it's so beautiful, this grand vision he builds and the way he fills it up. But for that very subtle kind of sweetness, there you look to Ali Akbar Khan and Vilayat Khan. They really set the standard in instrumental music, without a doubt.
I see. So we're going to talk about a bigger piece.
So what I'm going to be playing now is rag Naiki Kanra. Naiki Kanra is a rag played around midnight, and it's a specialty of my guru Pandit Buddhadev Das Gupta, and it's one of the first Kanra rags, predating the more famous Darbari Kanra and Koshi Kanra.
series on Sarod, an Indian string instrument. Mood India's presentation on Indian musical instruments is a production of California Arts Association. We welcome your feedback and comments and hope to see you here again next time. Until then, namaskar.